something the next day or two, send it in to compliance trainings. We will respond to your questions if it's of general interest. It'll be sent, the question and answer will be sent to all of you. And if you think of something months later, contact me directly or through compliance trainings, and I will be happy to respond to the individual questions. We're going to be talking about the subjects here. May not cover all the bullet points or maybe not meet your expectations totally. Again, if I don't, please use the Q&A feature to round out your appreciation of this material. When I look at the internet and the various forums discussing this type of subject, I notice a lot of confusion out there, and so obviously I attempt to address those kind of issues, and hopefully that's exactly what will happen here. When we talk about this design history file for devices, it's a requirement of the GMPs for devices, 21 CFR 820, specifically 820.30, design control. This was added to the GMPs back in 1996-97, and it was done because the FDA recognized that a lot of problems with products in the field were a result of design problems, and in their basis of their audits, they found that many of the design problems were caused by poor control of changes during the design phase. So they implemented this new requirement back in 96, 97, gave companies a year to transition in order to address that. So bear that in mind as we go through this discussion. The FDA's design history file is designed to prove compliance to design control during the development stage from a start date that is selected by the company. We'll talk about that later. Now that's different from the European Union's Medical Device Directive technical file. There you're working with a notified body that you contract with. They're the ones that audit that technical file to make sure it's complete and that it's on file with the various countries in which you ship your product that have CE marking on your product. The technical file is for certain classes of product, and then, of course, the design dossier for Class 3. And we'll talk about the difference in classification as well. But the key difference between these two series of documents is the U.S. FDA's design history file shows the development of product over a period of time, from a start date to design transfer, and then it's up to you as a company whether you keep it open during the life of the product or you close it out to change control under your GMP system. The Medical Device Directive's technical file shows adherence to the essential requirements in the Medical Device Directive, including all the various specs or ISO requirements and standards that it has to meet at that point in time at which it's being sold in that country. So if you change the product, then you have to change the technical file or design dossier, and it has to be re-audited by your notified body. And again, we'll go through this as we discuss the subject. So again, the design history file is a status or history of the development of the product under design control 820.30. The technical file design dossier is a snapshot of the product at the point of being marketing in the countries to which the file is being sent and where the product is being sent. So let's look at the U.S. FDA's requirements. The design history file provides the raw documentation and the design pathway leading to the device master record. The device master record defines the product in terms of listing all the other documents that define that product, such as if software code is, if software is involved, software code. It may list drawings, specs, raw materials, component specs, finished device specs, test requirements, the SOPs that act upon that product, both product specific and general, sterilization requirements if it's a sterile product, etc. So it's basically a listing of all the documentation that shows how that product is developed. And each company varies a little in how they define this and follow it. And of course, if you've been audited a few times by the FDA and they like the device master record the way you're designed, device master record the way you have it constructed, then leave it that way, obviously. The device history record is the batch record. So the template for that would be part of the device master record. The blank template. That traveler, that template, whatever you want to call it, that becomes part of the batch record or lot record is then filled out, signed and dated in the various elements, plus additional documentation added to it, test documentation, etc. Again, the templates may be in the device master record or applicable SOPs, but the finished documents, the completed documents that have been acted upon with data is then put into the batch record or the device history record. So there's 9 elements in 820.30 under design control. There's a planning requirement, design planning. There's design input, design changes, design reviews periodically held where it includes one member of that team has to be independent with no vested interest in the outcome of what's being reviewed. Design verification, validation, design transfer, and the resulting collection of all the above in a design history file. So we're going to be discussing each one of those elements. And I'm presenting a model, if you will, of what has gone through many years of review. It's addressed FDA adversary audits. It's gone through notified body audits, but it's only one approach, so bear that in mind. And the key to any of these is to define these terms. You will find that my definitions may not be fully in agreement with your definitions, and still both of our definitions might be acceptable to the FDA and or your notified body auditor. So that's the point to keep in mind as we go through this. If you notice some major areas where you disagree, feel free to bring that up during the Q&A at the conclusion. But I'm going to propose the points that I've used for many, many years in helping companies either meet GMP requirements or address non-compliance issues as a result of an FDA audit, which was then satisfactorily accepted by the FDA, and ditto for notified body audits as well. So as we go through this, we'll discuss some of these types of terms and issues. So let's start out with some of my working definitions. Now, when I go to the internet, I find, and also with working with clients, I find definitions all over the map, and everybody is very definitive on their definitions, no pun intended. They actually will, sometimes if they disagree with me, they'll pull out the ISO definition or they'll pull out one of the GMP definitions. And my point is, when you pull out those definitions, you cannot do anything based on those definitions. They don't tell you what to do. Let me give an example. If we look at the 820.30 for devices, under F, it says design verification. Each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures for verifying the device design. Design verification shall confirm that the design output meets the design input requirements. The results of design verification, et cetera, are included in the DHF. Okay, so how do you confirm? How do you document results? How do you verify? Well, my point is you do these things by testing, by inspecting, by developing a checklist and checking off the items on that checklist against requirements. That's my definition of verification, basically testing and inspection. Validation, I would define, well, let me read the definition here and then you determine whether you need further to it. It's under G in 820.30. Each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures for validating the device design. Design validation shall be performed under defined operating conditions on initial production units, lots, or batches, or their equivalents. Design validation shall ensure that devices conform to defined user needs and intended uses, and shall include testing of production units under actual or simulated use conditions. Design validation shall include software validation and risk analysis. Okay, well, we'll talk about each one of these elements, but you notice here, design validation is basically to ensure the device conforms to user needs and intended uses. I'll show a chart later on from the FDA that justifies my definition, but some companies do have a parallel. They have a validation of product and then they have a verification of product, each tied to the elements described in 820.30. So verification they would define as proving that the design output meets the design input, and validation proves that the user needs have been met by the resulting product. I'll show you why I include verification under validation, not parallel to it and equal to it. And I'll show why later on. But based on my definition, and again, if you define it another way, as long as it falls within the broad guidelines that I just read from the GMPs or from ISO, you're okay. But this is the approach I've used for many, many years. I've written peer-reviewed articles on it. I've been audited to it by the FDA, and like I mentioned, even some of those audits being adversarial audits. And so as a result of that, I include under validation these various verification steps. Now you notice one of those sub-bullet points, process equipment facility, DQ, IQ, OQ, PQ. Those are qualifications, design qualification, installation qualification, operation qualification, performance qualification. So to me, in this case, qualification is synonymous, as far as my working definition, is synonymous with verification. In order to run those IQ, OQ, PQs, you have to develop test cases and prove that the test cases do